This is a recording on home run research. I'm interested in home run research myself because I've hit several research home runs already in my career, and because I have off and on a responsibility for supervising students. I alternate periods of supervision with periods of no supervision because the students just interfere with the quality of my own mental work at times. And the way modern universities burden you for 30 years straight is not smart, and you really need something more than a 1-year sabbatical every 7. You need in my case, 4 years of supervision, 5 years of supervision, and then 4 years of non-supervision doing your own work, and then back to supervision. And I like the alternating rhythm. But this is not about the process that I use. It's nor is it praising the results. That's already documented elsewhere. But it's talking about how you can do home run research and how other people can do home run research, and then the process by which I teach my PhD and master students to do home run research, or even my undergraduates to do home run research. Number one, you've got to stand outside the various cultures that layer context and embed things in order to have power with them. And so that means you look at the neuroticisms, blind spots, and failings of all of academic culture. And in particular, you identify very precisely those blind spots, neuroticisms, and failings of U.S. academic culture and American culture within academia. And then you look at the failings within the blind spots and biases of particular academic fields. And then you look at the top 5 journals, their editors, like the last 3 editors they've had, the neuroticisms, blind spots, and manias of the last 3 editors each journal has had. So that's 3, maybe 4 layers of context. And you've got to be extremely negative. You have to be ruthlessly negative about how evil Harvard University and its faculty are in their effects on civilization. And you have to not make excuses for them. Well, we make many good people. Yes, but in general, you take $13 trillion of the world's wealth and give it to banks and throw it down the toilet and take it away from ordinary people every 20 years in banking crises. And you create psychopathic, manipulative guys who go to Wall Street and steal money from old ladies. They hide their evil behind professionalism, just like Eichmann hid his evil behind professionalism, just the old Hannah Arendt Eichmann in Jerusalem story all over again. McNamara killing people in Vietnam, and 30 years of his life afterwards amazed that he could actually be evil. How can a person with 800 GREs be evil? So you have to be really ruthless and really negative and really accurate. And so what is sick, I mean really, really delusionally sick about academics all over the world. And what can't you stand about them? What makes them look evil in history? And then America, what American academics and America's top colleges, what is utterly delusional, neurotic, blind, and sick about them? And then psychologists, what is utterly sick and neurotic about the field of psychology and how it does what it does and how it interacts with other fields? And then cognitive psychology, what is utterly sick, deluded, blind, and tyrannical and pharisaical about cognitive psychology's role within the other subfields of psychology, etc. So yeah, at each layer, you have to be ruthless and negative, ruthless and negative, ruthless and negative, ruthless and negative. And you have to have a really accurate reading about what these people are blind to, what culture they have that causes them to constantly not see certain kinds of failings they have, what victories they have, and how those victories make them have certain kinds of defeats they're unwilling to admit are defeats. It's like every talent, McNamara's Kennedy School 800 GRE math scores, mathematical optimization of Ford Motor Company systems, optimization of bombing campaigns in World War II, optimization of body counts in Vietnam. What did he hide as a cost in that talent? And it's clear the cost was bigger than the talent because he made the first American major defeat in a war, and he changed the culture of Americans' trust in their government. He may have ruined the United States as much as any single human being did, which is a pretty big cost for a Harvard education, and Harvard generated him. Harvard put their stamp on him, and they generated his mindset. And so Harvard owns that kind of evil, too. And Harvard produces a lot of that. Maybe mostly that. course, we have a lot of good people, a lot of good people. Yeah, right, like salt and pepper on this giant whale of evil. So you've got to hit home run research, you've got to really map the blind spots, the neuroticisms, the costs of every talent in several layers. And this is really easy to do and fun to do, and students take to it because they're new to these fields, and the idea that these wonderful elite institutions and people are actually evil or biased or deluded is new to them. And so it's a real eye-opening discovery that, wow, Harvard University consistently produces evil out of this department. And it really, if you watch how the departments work, you go look at the video lectures on the web, you see the places for evil being mapped out unconsciously in the professor's teachings and in the students' writings. And they're all blind to it. They all think this is just 800 GRE talent. And they can't see that it's already drifted into Eichmann-style evil, hidden by talent and eliteness. You know, it used to be kings and dictators that had this elite evil, and then in our time, it's these elite professions that have the hidden hiding places for evil. Once you've mapped that out for students and had students map that out, then you look at it as a moral. Home run research is really a moral campaign, and you've got to think about my favorite example for students is behaviorism and Skinner and Harvard, the tyranny of Skinner, and he was a tyrant. Harvard, the tyranny of Harvard, and it is a tyrant, and the tyranny of behaviorism, and it was tyrannical. You couldn't get a job anywhere because of the tyrannical nature of these people, the evil nature of Harvard, the evil nature of Skinner, the evil nature of behaviorism. And then one guy, Chomsky, wiped it out with an intellectual argument, not even with a data. He wiped it out with an argument. He wiped it out, not with data, but with an argument. And you've got to think about that. It isn't data that's going to do anything in this world because it's so biased how you select a sample size. How you select your sample is enormously more powerful than your p-values and your correlational results are. Very slight changes in your sample can move those p-values to any variable pair that you want to show a relation with. And there's a wonderful guy, I can't remember his name, has got a demonstration of this where he's got like 8 variables and he's got 11 key relations among them, and he can make any one of those relations statistically significant with tiny little tweaks of the sampling regime. All of which would be allowed by any current journal publisher, especially Psychology Review and these snobby guys who don't know math, who think they know math. People who publish Estes papers in psychology, just stupid editors. I mean, just mathematically morons. Reaction time studies of the frigate brain structure, just utterly stupid. It's like looking for gold with Snickers candy bars. You can do the fanciest math you want, you ain't going to find gold with a Snickers. Home run research, how do you do it? You map the failings, blind spots, and the evil of the layers that research is done in, and you mobilize students to build such a jaded, limited, circumspect view of each field's cost of its talents. And then you take some examples like the defeat of Harvard, Skinner, and behaviorism by not data, but an intellectual argument by a guy named Chomsky in 1956 or 57. And you look at what made that a tipping point. Why did that argument work so well? And then, there's some dynamics of satiation, some dynamics of supersaturation, some dynamics of almost Kuhnian dynamics of paradigm tiredness and boringness. There's some political dynamics of oppression. There's some Abbott, chaos of disciplines dynamics of the return of the defeated pole. So some generational effects within the field. You look at those dynamics, knowledge dynamics, and how they work in political dynamics, and attentional dynamics in fields, and you get students studying. Now, I can't understand for the life of me. Well, I know a PhD program doesn't require that of all PhDs, but I do. I have a 2-year course, which is my advising. I don't do advising face-to-face. I do a 2-year course of advising with every 2-week assignments. If you do your assignment, I talk to you the next 2 weeks. If you don't do your assignment, go to hell. I'm not going to talk to you until you do it. I don't give advice to students who don't apply the advice. And so, and I don't look for freedom of students to do research. I want them to follow a pattern, a 2-year pattern. It's a very broad pattern. It's got a lot of options and choices in it, but it's a fixed pattern. And if they follow my fixed pattern, they're going to learn a lot more about research than if they wallow around in vague ambiguity for 2 years. So the home run comes from understanding these attentional and paradigm and knowledge flow and generational dynamics within fields that make a field ready or not ready for revolutionizing in certain subfields. And so I train my students in that, and then they map which subfield of their chosen field is ready. And then they map their interest and the world's interest and look for overlaps where there's a saturated or field ready for a tipping point. And then we have them identify 2 kinds of tipping points: knowledge tipping points, you could call it theory tipping points, and practice tipping points, which are quite separate, not related to each other at all. The knowledge tipping point will lead to different changes of practice than the practice tipping point will lead to different changes in theory. And so we have them map tipping points. And I have 3 methods for finding a tipping point in the nonlinear system. And they identify tipping points. These methods work very well. They're quite accurate. I didn't realize it at the beginning, but after using them, they're a lot more accurate than I realized, than I planned for them to be. And then you have to do the social network building to not scare the field. And you've got to understand, it's not doing social networking to get people friendly to your ideas. You're really just doing the social networking to lower fear. And this is a matter of the person knowing you and the person knowing a sort of theme about you, that, oh, he's the multiple models guy, or he's the guy who does this new kind of statistics, or he's the simulation guy, the agent simulation guy, et cetera, et cetera. So you got to have you have to be, being known means intellectually known as a theme that identifies you, a focus that people can depend on you when they're like putting a panel together and we need an agent simulation guy. Oh, that would be Jones. He's the agent simulation guy. That's your intellectual identity. And then there's this personal identity that you're not scary or you're not frightening and that you're, can do teamwork and you're a decent person. So there's a personal knowing and there's a thematic intellectual role knowing. And you have to do that in order not to scare the field with your home run. And you don't want to tell people that you're aiming for a home run. And you don't want to announce that you've got a home run. That's for them to have the fun of discovering. And then there's this, how you write up your research. The first 3 pages have to take your breath away. They have to be such a cosmic, ontologically huge, beautiful telling of the whole history of research in the field, that just those pages alone take your breath away and say, what makes everyone who reads those first 3 pages say, well, I understand what I've been doing better because of these 3 pages. I don't know what the rest of this paper is, but the first 3 pages make me feel like a smarter person. So you have to understand that literature reviews can be home runs on their own, in that sense that they wrap up the field from an encompassing set of layered frameworks that nobody else has been arrogant enough to write before. Now you got a home run coming, which is why, generated by those frameworks, which is why you have the arrogance to use those frameworks. But the way the reader discovers it is this literature review takes my breath away, and I want all my students to read this because this is a better entry point into the whole field than anything else that's been written. And then you get to the point where there's the actual home run. And that's the tipping point idea that re-articulate, that makes the connections that allow you to re-articulate and rearrange all the existing results in the field based on these new encompassing frameworks. So they all have new meanings now. Wow, that wasn't really this, that was this, viewed in this new framework. And that wasn't really this, that was this. And it's helpful if there's 2 layers at least, or 3 of new frameworks, so that, oh, and this, and this. And that's the aha, that's the amazement moment that tells people that, wow, I haven't read a paper like this in 10 years, or 20 years. Or in this new subfield, there's never been a paper like this before. This is, even if it turns out not to be true, this is a stunning picture that just makes you think, makes you feel smarter, makes you understand the field, look at it differently. This is a great framing of everything. This is making the field, this is a real contribution to the field. That's what you want. And it's a performance in front of an audience of people, It's an intellectual performance in front of an audience of ideas of people, so they have a personal performance that you don't scare people, and in a thematic performance that you fit in and you recontext all these themes that are running around. And then it's very helpful in the discussion of your tipping point. And you can have crummy data. It doesn't have to have good data at all. Data is an American delusion. You can forget it. All the weak people who can't think run to data. And God knows PhD programs produce some of the wimpiest people the world has ever known, and they all publish in the Academy of Management with this wonderful goddamn data. The samples are all biased and partial and totally incompetent. You go all through these pyrotechnics on multiple regression and tetrad and Lisrael and structural equation modeling, none of which means anything because their sampling is so crummy. And because sampling is, expensive and it involves access, and people don't have time for it, they don't have the money for it. And so on a totally distorted, delusional basis of weak sampling, they do pyrotechnical. This is what I mean by stupid editors at Psychology Review, idiots who don't understand basic statistical math at all. And I'm talking about 50 years of editors at Psychology. There has never been an editor of Psychology Review who was competent in basic correlational statistics. Not one, ever. And they published STs, and that's proof. That is proof. And all you have to do is read them and laugh. Read these old papers and laugh. He was going to do reaction time studies of the brain to find out brain module structure. Wow, right. I'm going to take a Snickers bar and run around the earth and find oil deposits. Right. And they published it. They published hundreds of them. It's just, and you got people who make excuses. Well, at the time it was the best we could do, or we didn't know at the time. Well, if you don't know basic correlational statistics in 1930, or in 1940, or in 1950, or in 1960, or in 1970, or in 1980, or in 1990, or in 2000, or in 2010, or in 2020, then maybe you better stop calling yourself a professor. So, that's roughly the picture. Now, there's a couple of other little neat tricks in there. I evaluate all papers and all proposals, all dissertation proposals for creativity. I have 60 models of creativity, and I've got 10 sets of 6, and I want to know for each set of 6, do you embody, how does this work embody that kind of creativity or not? Is there any creativity in what you did? And is it one of these sorts of these 10 sorts, or is it 3 of these 10 sorts? Which 3? And if it's narrow, like these 3 right next to each other, then I'm going to suggest you get 1 or more that's on the opposite side of the circle, so that you have a distribution and a variety of approaches, kinds of creativity in your work. And then I have serious conversations late in the work when you have already a home run dissertation done. I'm sitting there torturing the student for another year about this creativity of their work, and how would you do the work? What would you add or recontext or change the work in order to embody these 2 kinds of creativity? What would we have to do to it? And these turn out to be extremely new avenue opening questions that end up turning the discussion section of the dissertation into real exciting stuff for foundations and funders. Here's a whole line of new research that needs to be done, and it's exciting. And so I find this very, very valuable, and very, very, I don't find any other professor in the world doing it. No, they intuitively evaluate whether it's creative or not, but really they're just looking for home run. And I've already handled that with what I told you before. So this is after the home run is in, this is then turning that implications further research section into another home run at the end of the paper, where funders look at that, Spencer Foundation, Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, these guys at Templeton Foundation look at this and say, wow, this would be a really fruitful direction to run in. This would be exciting stuff. Let's get 10 people working on this, and let's get Green helping us lay out the direction of how that would work. And so that's what you want.